أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ادع إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن إن ربك هو أعلم بمن ضل عن سبيله وهو أعلم بالمهتدين. صدق الله مولانا العظيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ادع إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن إن ربك هو أعلم بمن ضل عن سبيله وهو أعلم بالمهتدين. صدق الله مولانا العظيم.
Because that is what Islam stands for. Development in every ramification. Spiritual development, economic development, intellectual, educational, political development. And I've also learned through the letter you wrote to me, the letter of invitation, that Unifemiga is also interested in all these areas of development. That's a very good development too. But please, before I move on to talk about economic recession, it is my habit to always try to pay back to whoever has honored me by inviting me for a talk or a lecture like this. And one of the best ways I see in honoring whoever has honored me is to be fair to them. I think it will be unfair on my part if I fail to mention this particular point. Unifemiga, you have done a lot for Islam. And inshallah, you are still going to do a lot for Islam and for the upliftment of Muslims. But I would like to encourage you that you may need to pay more attention to the spiritual aspect of the development. I'm being fair to you, and I'll be honest with you. Because what I saw here this morning was strange. I didn't expect a gathering like this to have a minute silence in honor of a departed soul. A very honorable Muslim, a committed Muslim for that matter. My father, I am from Pakata axis of Ilorin. Professor Siru Jima is my father. It actually struck me as a big surprise. If I had gone to another gathering and I was asked to observe a minute silence, I may take it as being ordinary. But please, that is just to say, please add that to your program. More attention will be paid to the spiritual development of members and non-members alike. That is Islam for you. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. May Allah let us have the goodness of the two worlds. The goodness of the world of this life and that of the hereafter. And that is why that prayer is specifically recommended for Muslims in Surah Al-Baqarah, that we must always seek for the truth, or seek the truth. Having said this, I think I can now go to economic recession. Nigeria is said to be in an economic recession. It is also being claimed of recent that already Nigeria is moving out of recession. How true is that? I think we will have to leave that one to the experts in the field of economics to judge. But what matters most, whether we are still in a recession or we are already coming out of the recession, what assurances are we going to have that very soon we are not going to find ourselves in another economic recession? Because if the factors that led to the present recession are not addressed, it's just a matter of time that, may Allah forbid, but Nigeria may end up finding itself in another recession not quite long a time. And that is why I'm here today to talk to you, my fathers, brothers and sisters and mothers, to let us see from the Islamic and from the Sharia perspective, what are the causes, what are the factors that led us into where we are? And more importantly, what is our preparation so that we don't find ourselves in the same situation again, at least in the nearest future. Because I must tell you, and alhamdulillah, I'm happy to hear that we have an economist in our midst. Recession is not abnormal, it's a normal phenomenon in economy. For an economy to recess, it's just like a human being. You are strong sometimes, you become weak some other times. So that is how economists usually view a recession in an economy. Is a normal thing to happen. There is a time for an economy to boom, and there is a time for an economy to recess. But before we go into all this, my training as a Sharia expert, or as people claim me to be a Sharia expert, anyway, I'm still a student of knowledge, has taught me one important principle that we normally reiterate in the field of Sharia. And that is what we say, al-hukmu ala shay far'un an tasawwur. Adjudication of any case must be an offshoot of its perception. You have to understand something well before you start discussing it. Because when we start talking about recession, the factors, the causes, the solutions, I'm afraid some of us may not even know what exactly is a recession. What do we mean by a recession? And the Sharia scholars would like to start from there by saying, al-hukmu ala shay far'un an tasawwuri. Sorry, the organizers are working on that. I have slides for this presentation so that you will all be part of the presentation. And I've given them the slides at a very reasonable time. I don't know what is wrong, but they will fix it. What is a recession generally? A recession is said to be a temporary downturn in economic activities. Like I told you, we can treat any economy like a human being. There is time for an economy to boom, to be strong. And naturally, there is some other times when an economy will become weak. But we have indicators that will clearly tell us whether we have already found ourselves in a recession or not. And the first indicator of a recession in any economy is to have falling GDP. GDP means gross domestic product. That is when we put all together goods and services that are produced in every country. That is how countries are rated economically. And this is part of our problem that I will try to address from the Sharia perspective today. We like to deceive ourselves a lot in this country. Nigeria claims to be the biggest or the largest economy in Africa, but is that the reality? When we talk of GDP, we have three ways of assessing a GDP of a country. GDP nominal, GDP PPP, that is purchasing power parity. But even more importantly is when you take GDP along what we call per capita income. That is what shows you the level of yourself in the midst of the economies of the world. But you know our politicians, when they want to deceive us, they will just tell us what an economist will call GDP nominal. Oh, this is our GDP. Nigeria is better than South Africa. And yet, look at what is happening. Nigerians are being killed in South Africa, yet our people are still trooping to South Africa. Why not staying back at home if truly we are better than them? But the point I'm making here is that the first indicator to show whether an economy is in a recession or not is when you experience a falling GDP, at least for 3 consecutive quarters in a year. When the year is divided into 4, you can have a falling GDP for a quarter and it rises again in the subsequent quarter. That is not a recession from the economic perspective. But if it continues as it has happened in Nigeria, that you have it consecutively for 3 quarters, your GDP, the value of your goods and services locally produced annually is dropping, is falling for 3 consecutive quarters, then you must know you are already in a recession. And unfortunately, this has happened to us in Nigeria. Another major indicator of an economic recession is to have an increased unemployment. People will start losing their jobs. The reason is not far-fetched. When there is no money in circulation, people don't have money to buy the product. All this GDP is talking about goods and services for people to consume. And when there is no sufficient money, people will buy less. And by the time they are buying less, the producer will also think of reducing the production. And by then, naturally, any producer will think of reducing also the workforce. By the time I'm producing, let's say, 1,000 of this product, I engage 100 staff. When it drops to 100, you expect me to still maintain the workforce of 100? It's not possible. So that's another major indicator of knowing that a country's economy is actually in a recession. But we are still talking economy, and all these I'm talking of appear to be the languages of the economists, like the accountant. Our chairman was introduced as being a former accountant general. But what I know is that once you are an accountant, you are always an accountant. Can they see it now? Is it displayed? It's important for them to follow. Not yet? Okay. What is the recession? That is the slide we are still talking about. So, okay, let me put it in a layman language. Even anybody that has nothing to do with economy will understand a recession this way. A recession in a layman language means overall negative mood of an economy. In some other words, when people start saying no money outside for so long time, then that shows, even from a layman language, I think when you talk to an average Nigerian in 2016, in late 2015, what he or she would normally tell you is, Magbekosi Owonta. Osowonta is another indicator of a recession in an economy. So that is just about by way of defining what exactly do we mean when we talk about an economic recession. Important facts. Are we there? Because these are facts that will help us assimilate what will follow of the Sharia perspective. The first of these important facts is what I've mentioned earlier on, that recession from a purely economic perspective is not abnormal. There is no country in the world, no single country in the world that has not experienced a recession one time or another. So for a country, for an economy to be in a recession is normal. And part of the mercies of Almighty Allah is even that Throughout the history of recessions all over the world, when you look at the time of recession, it's usually shorter than the time of an economic boom that either preceded it or that followed a recession. So this is part of Almighty Allah's mercy. What I usually say to describe this phenomenon is that, you see, when we complain of a particular sickness, illness now, malaria or whatever, somebody said it's not because we are actually weak, but because we have been strong for a long time. So when you now see what is opposite, you now complain of having something wrong with your heart. So we can understand a recession in an economy in this light, that even the time of a recession is usually shorter. Nigeria, if we put our house in order, in no distant time, we shall be out of recession, inshallah ta'ala. And look at when we have been having an economic boom. So generally, the period of an economic boom is even longer than the period of an economic recession. And also, more importantly, the recovery coming out of recession cannot be equal when you look at countries that have recessions. It may be faster in some countries, but slower in some other countries. Why is it faster in some and slower in some? This is going to be the focus of our talk this morning from the Sharia perspective. A question: what we are facing now, what we are experiencing in Nigeria now, is it a Nigerian recession or a global recession? Because I'm sorry to say this again, Nigerian politicians, they love deceiving us a lot. When people complain, like I said earlier on, so that no salary, no wages, they will say it's all over the world. If you go to, it's everywhere. They will say it on the radio, on the television, so as just to pacify us, to see things as being ordinary. But I must tell you, and I have an economist in our midst, what is actually being experienced today is not categorized as a global recession from the economic perspective. There is history of recession all over the world. IMF, International Monetary Fund, actually keeps record of recessions in the world. Look at the years of global recession that have been recorded by IMF. We had a global recession in 1975. We had another one in 1982. The third one was in 1991, and the last one was in 2008. So even from the IMF angle, what is being experienced in Nigeria that they are telling us is all over the world is not seen as being a global recession, because they have track record of when an economic recession occurs and so on and so forth. But another question, also closely related to that. We don't have a global recession, that is the truth. But is the recession we are facing now, is it peculiar to Nigeria alone? No. It's not a global recession, but at the same time, it's not also peculiar to Nigeria. A lot of countries in the world also presently are facing recession, because the same factor that led into our own recession is also available in those countries. But I want to make it clear that whoever tells us that this is a global recession is not talking from the point of knowledge. What we have is not a global recession. Effect of recession, all of us, we have seen that. Even the rich and the poor, everybody will feel it. When there is a recession in an economy, not only the matter of poor ones feeling the bite of recession, even the rich of the citizens, they will also feel it. And this always reminds me, our case in Nigeria, it was Professor Sam Aluko that said this once, that usually when you have a recession in an economy, you have poor and you have the poor and the rich. Professor Aluko said the poor Nigerians can no longer sleep because they are hungry. We know why a poor man will not sleep, because he is hungry. But Professor Aluko added to that why the rich ones can also not sleep, because the poor ones are awake. So you need to tackle what is making them, what is letting them lose sleep, if you also want to sleep well. Professor Aluko said it. The poor ones in the country can no longer sleep because they are hungry. But you that have something to eat, you won't be able to sleep also because you are afraid of those who are awake. They can attack you anytime. So what I'm saying in essence is that the recession we are facing in Nigeria, it has a lot of effects, negative effects, and they are being felt by both the rich and the poor. One of the effects of the present recession in Nigeria is the unemployment that was already high. The rate was high in Nigeria even before recession. But because of the present recession, it has become higher. People are now either unemployed or underemployed. That's another economic language. A lot of people would say he's employed, but he's underemployed. In the situation, thanks to my vice chancellor, I said it in his absence, I'm saying it publicly now. A lot of universities in Nigeria now, they cannot pay full salaries for their staff, but not in Unilori for that matter. A better by far university. In most universities, in some universities, don't let me use that most, but in some universities, notable ones, like UI for example, they have not been able to be paying full salary. This is what an economist will describe as being underemployment. When your employer comes and tells you, you either take 30% of your entitlement or I lay you off. Choose one of the two. You know, ordinarily you will prefer to, if it is 30%, bring it. If it is 50%, bring it. But you are already underemployed. So one of the major effects of the economic recession we are facing in Nigeria is that a lot of people have either become unemployed. In the private sector, they lay people off. Just yesterday I was reading this popular TVC, Television Continental, as economically boom as it is at BBC. But you don't know that yesterday, TVC sacked 145 of its staff strength. 145, just yesterday. So I don't know why they say we are already moving out of recession. So we should stop deceiving ourselves. We need to tackle certain things. This is what we want to introduce the Sharia thought on, so that we can see whether we are actually preparing to move out of recession or not. So I'm still talking about on the effect of recession as it's being called in Nigeria. The third one is inflation. We all know when you go to market today, the Congo of Gari or Eluvo or rice, our mama, this is Ramadan. I know things are not easy, but please be with us. Be patient with your husbands. Things will become better, inshallah. But this is a major effect of a recession. There is inflation in town. Prices of commodities are very high, getting higher and higher. Then finally, another major effect of the present recession in Nigeria is the purchasing power of our local currency, Naira. Naira today has lost more than, I think, we can say close to 70% of its value. Because we used to exchange a Naira to dollar immediately before the recession at maybe 150, 160. But it got to the point that we were paying 500 Naira to get one single dollar. So the purchasing power of our local currency was actually affected by the current economic recession. Why is Nigeria in an economic recession? You know, I told you as a matter of fact, the present recession, even though it's not a global recession, but it's not also peculiar to Nigeria alone. But the question I'm asking, and I've not got a satisfactory answer, why is Nigeria one of the worst hit in the world? Because when Saudi is moving through recession now, that's another major exporter in the world. But you can't see things as we have it in Nigeria today. They are still able to manage things. Why are we not being able to do that in Nigeria? It's because of some of the things we are going to discuss here today. So if you are on that slide, I mentioned the factors. I said the factors are numerous. They include, like my chairman said today, over-reliance on a single commodity as our source of revenue. Another factor is, he mentioned it also, the spend it all attitude. That's the Nigerian attitude for you. Spend it all. Whatever we have, we must eat it, consume it completely. That also naturally leads to an economic recession. And then, what we all know, corruption is still very much around. It's still very much around. May Allah give President Buhari more sound health to continue to pilot the affairs of this country. He's waging a serious war, but the corruption in Nigeria is still endemic. Corruption is still very much around in our nation. Then number 4 is what I call fiscal irresponsibility. We have displayed a lot of irresponsibilities in terms of managing our resources. So the details of all these are what we shall now be discussing given the Sharia perspective. One major cause of an economic recession is a sharp decline in the prices of commodities, particularly the commodities that a country relies on for revenue. Let me give you this graphically. In 2015, you know our major source of revenue in Nigeria is oil. Although sometimes they would, even, sorry sir, you economists, sometimes you don't tell us the whole truth. They would say, no, oil is just contributing 35% to our GDP. What is oil? Nigeria cannot say what is oil. Over 90% of our external revenue comes from the oil. So we should stop deceiving ourselves. We should tell the whole truth. In law, Professor Akami, in law, half truth is a crime. Whether tell it, say it. So you can be silent in law. There's no crime in remaining silent. But if you must talk, you must speak the whole truth. So our economists, please try to tell us the whole truth. Oil is still the major source of our revenue in Nigeria. Over 90% of our revenue still comes from oil. And you can now see that it is natural. When you have a commodity that you rely on to generate your income, the same commodity in 2012, the price of a barrel of oil was 109 US dollars. In 2013, it was 105 US dollars. In 2014, these are all before the present recession. It was sold for 109, for 105, and even in 2014, it was not performing very badly. It was sold for $96 per barrel. But all of a sudden, that is why we find ourselves in that situation when Buhari came in 2015. All of a sudden, the price of oil dropped to $49. Remember, some of you who have some businesses, you can also think of that. Your commodity that you normally sell to people at 109, 105, all of a sudden, the market price fell, and you have no choice but to sell at the rate of 49. That has affected greatly your source of income, and it will automatically impact on anything that you do as a government, because you can only spend from what you have. You cannot spend from what you don't have. I have just remembered another principle I was taught by my organs in law. Never that quod non habet. What you don't have, you can give. That's something that law can give the economists to benefit from. You can only spend from what you have. And that is the reason why Nigeria was having 109 per barrel, 105 per barrel. All of a sudden it became 49. But as I said, if this is what happened to oil, is the oil being sold by Nigeria alone? In fact, Nigeria is not number one oil exporter. Number one oil exporter in the world? It's Saudi Arabia. There's no doubt in that. The number one oil exporter in the world is Saudi Arabia. So if somebody should feel the bad, the strife, it should be Saudi Arabia for that matter. But what happens is completely different from what it ought to be. So the first issue that we must look into critically in Nigeria is we need to rethink it. Nigeria being a mono economy is not helpful at all. You know, as you rightly mentioned it, we were not born into oil economy in Nigeria. When was oil discovered in Nigeria? It was in 1956. I'm quite sure some of you were already living, and our old babas, some of them have lived and died before 1956. What were they eating before any drop of oil? But you see, like my chairman mentioned, the moment we discovered oil, we all became lazy. That's an easy money. You just take it out of take a barrel of oil, 2 barrels, take it to market and sell, and go and call your finance commissioners all over the country to come and share every month. So Nigeria being a mono economy is even the first and major cause of this present recession. For example, because this is what actually happened to Nigeria. In 2011, it was recorded, and that is why I normally said it. President Goodluck Jonathan, true to his name, was a good law, but he misused the opportunity. Nigeria has never been richer than the period spent by Goodluck Jonathan as our president in the history of this country. It was at that time, it was recorded, the highest we have ever had is $1,091 billion. That is the highest of our revenue all over. But all of a sudden, look at the difference. A country that was earning more than $1,000 billion a month, all of a sudden we were earning 498, more than half. It must affect us, no doubt about that. So recession is a natural consequence. You have such a situation when all of a sudden your income drops from more than 1,091 billion to just 498 billion. But that was not the only factor. Nigeria is a land of wonders. Around the same time, either it was planned or it was just a mere coincidence. Around the same time, the crisis in Niger Delta just got escalated. We now have what in law they will also say a double jeopardy. A commodity that when you take to market, it was selling for 109, 105. Now you have to beg people to buy it at 49. Yet, when it was being sold at 109, let's say you are able to take to market 200 barrels. All of a sudden, you couldn't take more than 100 or 80 something barrels to market. So that's our problem in Nigeria. The prices are falling globally, yet we have less and less commodities to sell. So there's no where in the world that such things will happen, that we will not have a recession. But what is the Sharia answer? What is the Sharia answer to this factor of Nigeria being a mono economy? Please, if you have your copy of Al-Quran al-Kareem, you can open Surah to Yusuf, verse number 67. Or you can record it and later look it up at home. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقال يا بني لا تدخلوا من باب واحد وادخلوا من أبواب متفرقة وما أغني عنكم من الله من شيء إن الحكم إلا لله عليه توكلت وعليه فليتوكل المتوكلون. The Prophet of Allah, Yaqub alayhi salatu wasalam, who was the father of Prophet Yusuf. Surah Yusuf narrated almost the whole life history of Prophet Yusuf. When the calamity befell the family of Yaqub, and they were looking for a way out, one of the solutions for Prophet Yaqub by then was to send the remaining of his children. Already Yusuf was missing. The remaining 11, he had to send them to fetch for the rest of the family. But look at the economic wisdom that is being introduced in this particular verse. Prophet Yaqub now gathered his children that now you have to go out and fetch for the family. But instead of, when they were going to Egypt then, when you get to Egypt, ask of how many entrances, how many gates does Egypt as a city or as a town has? Then if you know how many gates, how many entrances Egypt has, لا تدخلوا من باب واحد. Avoid entering through one single gate, but divide yourselves. وَدِخُلُوا مِنْ أَبْوَابٍ مُتَفَرِّقَةٍ, and enter through different doors, different gates, different entries. This is where the Muslim economists developed the theory of diversification from an Islamic perspective. That what this particular verse is calling us to is what we have actually failed to do in Nigeria, and that is to diversify our economy. As long as we continue to rely heavily, as we are doing, on one single commodity, it is oil today, it may be another commodity tomorrow. When I tell people that, do you know that this oil will dry up one day? Because all what we are facing now, the oil is still there. But according to the initial projection, by year 2030, our reserves are likely to dry up. The oil reserves in Nigeria by year 2030, unless Allah bless us with some other reserves. But the ones we have that we can tap today, it is projected by year 2030 that by year 2030, Nigeria may wake up one day and we won't find a drop of oil. Where shall we go? But before it is too late, we should start trying to diversify our economy. This is what this particular verse of Surah Yusuf is telling us. لا تدخلوا من باب واحد وادخلوا من أبواب متفرقة. As I said, this is found in Surah Yusuf. Surah Yusuf is what is normally referred to as chapter 12 of Al-Quran al-Kareem, and this is in verse 67. The second factor, I will be taking the factor together with the solution to it. Let me quickly remind us. The first factor we have identified is that of what? Heavy reliance on one single commodity as a source of revenue. And that is why when the commodity of that particular, when the price of that commodity falls, no doubt we will find ourselves in recession any other time again. Unless if we have diversified our economy. When something coming from oil drops, we can look at agriculture. We can look at mining. We can look at services. Japan as a country today, Japan is the third largest economy in the world. There's no drop of oil in Japan. They don't have any oil in Japan. Singapore, they don't have oil in Singapore. These are great economies in the world. So Nigeria, please, let us listen to what our chairman has said today. It is unfortunate. Because before 1956, we were eating something. We were sustaining ourselves. All of a sudden, we discovered all in 1956, we all went to sleep. And because this is, and you see, it's even embarrassing to some of us when we travel out and people will be joking, will be testing at us. Because we are not even, we don't feel shy away from that. When a state governor sends his finance commissioner to Abuja at the end of the month to share from the oil revenue, and there was a decline in the market, and what he was able to get was lesser than what he expected. The government will come back and tell us, you see, we had less allocation, so no salary. It's too embarrassing that I think we have tied all our lives to the price of oil as a commodity. It shouldn't be. Countries in the world are moving away. Even the largest oil producer in the world, Saudi Arabia, is heavily diversifying its economy. The reliance of Saudi Arabia on oil as a source of revenue is even less than what we have in Nigeria. So please, this is a message of Al-Quran al-Kareem. لا تدخلوا من باب واحد وادخلوا من أبواب متفرقة. The second factor and the Sharia answer is spend it all attitude. It's unfortunate. It has become a Nigerian, not to say as he rightly said. Whereas is an arrangement of Almighty Allah that sometimes you will have more and some other times you will have less. And the only way for you to prepare for a time when you will have less is to do what? Is to save for a rainy day. Where do we have that one in Al-Quran al-Kareem? Please open your Surah to Yusuf again, and this time around verses 43 to 49, and I recite. وقال الملك إني أرى 7 بقرات سمان يأكلهن 7 عجاف وسبع سنبلات خضر وأخرى يابسات يا أيها الملأ ائتوني برؤياي إن كنتم للرؤيا تعبرون. Then we move to verse 47 because of our time. قال تزرعون 7 سنين دأبا فما حصدتم فذروه في سنبله إلا قليلا مما تأكلون. I think some of you have even known the meaning. I will tell you. Look at how Al-Quran al-Kareem is giving us answers to our problem. The king of that time had a dream. This is what is very important in Al-Quran. He had that dream. What was the dream? Ara sab'a baqaratin siman. I saw very fat, 7 cows, sab'a baqaratin siman. But all of a sudden, ya'kuluhunna sab'un rijal. In the same dream, I also observed other 7 cows that are lean, not so fat. 7 fat cows and 7 lean cows. What was surprising is this: the 7 lean cows are consuming the 7 fat cows. Can you explain the analogy? 7 baqaratin siman ya'kuluhunna 7 hijab. 7 fat cows have been consumed by 7 lean cows. A king that meant well for his citizen. When he saw this, he didn't take it as ordinary. He gathered men of wisdom around him. قال أفتوني برؤياي إن كنتم للرؤيا تعبرون. Please explain to me this mystery that I've seen in my dream. How can 7 lean cows be consuming 7 fat cows? Then the answer came from a prophet of Allah. Next time around, Prophet Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, تَزْرَعُونَ 7 سِنِينَ دَأَبًا. What this means is that you have to start from now. Your source of income is agriculture. You have to continuously plan, sow, engage in massive agricultural production for continuous 7 years. Continue like that. فَمَا حَصَبْتُمْ. But anytime it is time for you to harvest, each year we have to harvest before you start planting again. He said, فَمَا حَصَبْتُمْ فَذَرُوهُ فِي سُنْبُلِهِ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِمَّا تَأْكُلُونَ. You don't have to overconsume because you are overproduced. I think the analogy is clear. Because you are overproduced, that should not enhance your consumption unnecessarily, unreasonably. Eat what is satisfactory alone, then whatever is left, فَذَرُوهُ فِي سُنْبُلِهِ. Leave them in a perfect storage. ذَرُوهُ فِي سُنْبُلِهِ. This is another message of Al-Quran al-Kareem. And this is exactly what Nigeria is not doing, and I don't know when we are going to start doing that. I will give you instances that show clearly that this attitude of spend it all is actually ruining us as a nation. is ruining our economy. So please note that this is in Surah Yusuf also, but verses 43 up to 49. And the key word here is fadaruhu fi sumbuli. Don't eat it all. The fact that you have overproduced does not necessarily mean you must over-consume. Consume what will satisfy you. That is all. You don't overeat. You overeat, you don't overconsume. But whatever is left, a time will come. That is sabu abakorating. The lean cows will now be consuming what? Will now be consuming what? The fat cows of 7 years. Prophet Yusuf said, and not some other 7 years will follow when you will not have such huge agricultural product. The environment, the atmosphere will not be so conducive for you to do. Then you will have to consume what you have saved throughout those 7 years of abundance. That is the meaning of 7 lean cows consuming 7 fat cows. Now, this is what Al-Quran al-Karim has told us. But what did we do in this country? We don't need to go too far. Let's just move back to 1999. That is at the inception of this present civilian rule, democratic rule. In 1999, if I should ask you what was the price of oil, the sole commodity that you are relying on, some people may say it was 50. It wasn't. It was just $17.44 per barrel when Obasanjo was in power. A barrel of oil was being sold at $17.44 per barrel. But all of a sudden, between 1999, by the time we were in 2008, unfortunately Obasanjo has gone. But we must give credit to Obasanjo. Obasanjo did not have that opportunity of having oil boom in his time. But if I tell you what Obasanjo left in the cover of this nation, in our foreign reserve, you will be surprised. We are not praising or abusing anybody, but we are placing the fact before Nigerians. The oil was being sold at the rate of $17.44 per barrel. By 2008, it was 94. You see that high? That is when we were overproducing. Our income actually surged, increased. And instead of taking heed, instead of listening to what the Quran told us, we increased our consumption. We were eating everything, as if it will continue that way. And unless we are deceiving ourselves, the curve in the price of oil is known to economists all over the world. It's not stable. Nobody can tell me that because oil is being sold at, in 1994, it was being sold at 94, that it will continue that way. He must have read in the history of oil price in the world. The same oil was sold at $10 per barrel in the 70s. It was $10 to $11 in the 70s. We said in 1999 it was 17.44. In 2008 it was 94, and it rose steadily until when it was 2012, we had 109, like I mentioned earlier on, and 105. When our oil was being sold at 10 something, more than 100, we should have known that that is abnormal. Even the major oil exporters in the world, other major oil exporters, they were saying it clearly. Because I was still in Saudi Arabia, I still listening to their finance petroleum minister say the interest of this country is for oil to sell below or around 30-40 US dollars. But here in Nigeria, we saw it as a golden opportunity to try to consume it all. So all of a sudden, the oil that was being sold at 109, 105, in 2016, it was just $40. $40 per barrel. So look at the huge fall in our in the price of oil and by extension in our revenue. What is strange in the Nigerian case is that when we had more, we automatically started consuming more, in fact consuming it all. I copied this thing from, so that to compare notes from other countries. Like I told you, Saudi Arabia is the #1 oil exporter in the world. I'm using Saudi Arabia as an example because we trade in the same commodity. The New York Times in 2015, the current Deputy Crown Prince, that is the third man in command in Saudi Arabia, they call him Deputy Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. He was interviewed by New York Times. Please listen to what he said. At the time, there was already, the price was already falling, declining. And when he was asked, are you not going to face a serious problem as a major oil exporter in the world? Mohammed bin Salman said proudly and with confidence, even if oil falls to $30 a barrel, Riyadh, that is the capital of Saudi Arabia, will have enough revenues. Riyadh will have enough revenues to keep building the country without exhausting its savings. That is, we are not having a nightmare because the oil is being sold at 40. He said even if the oil were sold at $30 per barrel, we will continue our normal developmental activities in the same pace without even exhausting our resources. But you know, before somebody can come out to say this, he must have something at home. This information I got it from the special advisor to the CBN governor, the present governor. He told me that when he discovered that around the time Nigeria was saying we had 40, we had 20, we have used it, it remained 4, it remained 2, Saudi Arabia could boast of $800 billion in reserve. You can see the difference. They were able to do this because they listened to Al-Quran al-Kareem. فَذَرُوهُ فِي سُنْبُلِهِ. But in our own case, now let's come back home. What happened in my country, my beloved country, Nigeria? Nobody will answer that question but our former president, Goodluck Jonathan. President Goodluck Jonathan was also interviewed by another media outlet. This is called Bloomberg TV. Listen to what President Jonathan said. When in other climes they were boasting of, even if it should sell at 30, we will continue to build our nation because we have enough, we have saved enough. Let me just read unto you, like I did with Salman, Mohammed bin Salman. Look at what our own president had to say. He said this after he had left power anyway. He said, at any time, the earnings from oil drop, the governors would insist that there is no place in our laws that actually say that the federal government should keep the reserve. Our governors will insist that no, and our guys in law, there's no place in our law that says you must say. It's funny enough, you know, one of them, when they left power, they will come back to reason. Recently, about a month or so ago, I watched the former governor of Anambra State, Peter Obi. Maybe you also saw that program. Peter Obi himself confessing. He said, how on earth can a nation spend all what he gave? Peter Obi said, jokingly, even people at garage, at motor garage, when they have money, they know they must save. But he said in the Nigerian case, the governors, they will pressurize the president. And this is what President Jonathan actually said. And you know what was the consequence of this pressure on Jonathan? It's unfortunate. It's on record that Jonathan made $20 billion in reserve. $20 billion. But do you know how much was left when he was handing over? $2 billion. Yes. We squandered $18 billion. If we can point to the infrastructure that we have built, fine. That no, we've spent this $18 billion, but this is what we have achieved. Nothing to show. And when he was asked, why did you do this, Mr. President? A former president, you inherited so amount of money. By the time, even in your own time, like I said, Nigeria has never been richer than the time President Jonathan was in control. yet he squandered everything. But this is his own excuse. That each time I ask them to say, they will say there is no place in our law that says we must say, but we must share. That's Nigeria. But Allah told us, "Fadaruhu fi sumbul." We have to move fast. And that is why I said here, I even quoted that section. The section the governors usually refer to is true. It's section 162, sub 3 of our constitution. That say any amount standing to the credit of the federation account shall be distributed. Any amount shall be distributed. So they have their way. And that is why we are saying this is a man-made law. It's not perfect. If it needs to be reformed, let us reform our law. For someone to say anything that I get I must spend is crazy, to say the least. So we have to move fast now. I have just 20 minutes left. Now let's move to factor number 3. The factors that led us as a nation into the economic recession. And that is what I call fiscal irresponsibility. You know, we have a law that says we must be fiscally responsible. But most times we behave irresponsibly through wasteful spending. But before we cite the examples like I did for the past ones, let me give you the Quranic answer. What did Allah tell us in Al-Quran Al-Kareem? Open your Surah Al-Isra. That's chapter 17 of Al-Quran Al-Kareem. وآت ذا القربى حقه والمسكين وابن السبيل ولا تبذر تبذيرا إن المبذرين كانوا إخوان الشياطين وكان الشيطان لربه كفورا. Quran says anybody that spends extravagantly, wastefully, is an ally, is a friend, is a brother of devil. We must avoid such a person or an institution for that matter. So Nigeria was also found wanting, unfortunately, in the area of prudent management of our resources. Look at those examples. I will give you some examples now. And before I already quoted President Jonathan. Let me quote our late president, President Yaradua. That man, unfortunately, didn't live long. He could have been one of the best presidents in this country because he had very good intentions, just like the present president. You will notice that these people have good intentions for the country. Around that time, I think Nigeria was planning to host an international event, a sporting event for that matter. And when they brought the budget to Yaradua, he said, "Where is this going all over the world? You know, Nigeria will deceive ourselves. Even America hosted. Even Qatar hosted, even Qatar is hosting. Can we conveniently compare ourselves to those countries?" Then he made that remarkable statement that I recorded here. He said, in Nigeria, we must learn not to spend on what we want, but on what we need. This is another area. It's just a matter of, not a matter of we want to be like America in the day, we want to be like UK in the day. It's not possible. We have to do as they did. He said it was time for us to stop spending on what we want, but actually we should spend on what we need. Did Nigeria, for Allah's sake, did Nigeria miss such an event to be hosted? International sporting event has involved billions of dollars maybe. So that is another word of wisdom from a past leader of this country. Somebody said jokingly, perhaps, we have what we call Guinness Book of Records. They have changed the name now. It's now Guinness World Records. And what they usually record in Guinness Book of Records, or as it's been called now, World Record, is something that is extraordinary. So an achievement that is uncommon. But somebody said, perhaps if Nigeria wants to compete to be on that record, we have an advantage. Where is that advantage is for Nigeria to enter into a competition of where on earth a nation that will find the highest number of abandoned projects. The highest number of what? That's part of that's part of the manifestations of our peaceful irresponsibility. Let me give you one example. We organized a general election in how many years? 4 years. In every 4 years, we organize an election. If I ask you, do you know the last election of 2015 cost us in this nation almost 1 trillion naira? Yes, it's on record. Almost 1 trillion naira. That was the cost of the 2015 election. And at that time, please, if I'm wrong, sir, I think our budget was in the range of 4 trillion. That means we have not decided to spend 1/4 of what belongs to 200 million almost for a year just to organize an election. An election that we know the result may not even be. Well, let's leave that one. We are not discussing that one today. But the problem with us is we must be fiscally responsible. Our wasteful spending in this country is very, very high. I can continue to cite my personal experiences, but let me just give one. It's personal. I was once invited to an international conference. It was hosted by a state government. I won't mention the name of that state, but obviously not Kwara. It's not Kwara. The conference was co-organized by an international body, co-organized by the state government. I was invited to deliver a paper on how we can use Islam and security and peaceful coexistence. When I got there, I could only travel to Abuja by air. I had to go by road to that state. I won't mention the name of the state. But I knew some of the people I met there. They all came by road from Lagos, from anywhere, from Kano, But when it was time to pay us back, the promise they would refund all our expenses. Everybody was expecting to be paid air ticket. Even that is what happens in Nigeria. Even if you ride a bicycle to a place, you will expect to be paid if you buy the ticket. But you see, an international organization, they don't do that. What they did was to ask us for our ticket. Even if you, yes, that's what they do. At international forum, they will ask for proof. Even if you are spending $1,000, it's not a problem to them. They will pay. But you must be able to show something. When they started asking, our people got angry, asking me of my status. What can our people interact with? Do you know what happened that night? It's very bad. The governor of the state got news of the development. Then immediately he sent one of his advisors to come and meet us and pacify us that everything will be taken care of. Leave them. The next thing I saw was a knock on my door. Without asking me for any paper, even I knew myself I could only produce that of belonging to Abuja, but they paid me everything. No paper, no, and those who even rode maybe bicycle, they say that's what we do in Nigeria. How can you be asking me myself? But those are the countries that are far, far richer than us. That's how they are managing their resources. It's not a question of we have, we must spend. That's a personal experience that I had in this country, unfortunately. So we can continue. It's because of our time. I have some disturbing examples here. Okay. I saw it in a recent publication that, you see, I may also come there. This is what we call a fake economy. Sometimes we operate a fake economy in Nigeria. Nigeria should not have a secondary school where the school fees will be 1 million or even 500,000. It's too much for our status. But what do we have today? It was reported that the owner of private jets in Nigeria, those who own private jets, how much do they spend to maintain it annually? 30 billion naira. This is recorded. I can give you the sources. And more alarmingly, somebody told me he works in Abuja International Airport. He said those of us who are working here, we just get sad and sad every day. I said, why? He said sometimes this private jet will be hired perhaps from Lagos to Abuja, and when we try to welcome who is on board, we discover that it's a daughter of 3-4 years old, because he wanted to see mommy. She was schooling here, and she wanted to see mommy. A private jet had to take her to Abuja and return her back to her. That's how we spend our money. That's how we spend our money. In this same country, what is the minimum wage? 18,000 naira. Let me give you an assignment. Go and read Punch newspaper of December 16, 2010. It was done by one good investigative journalist. He put it on record that, let me read some of what he said here, so as to show how irresponsible or responsible we are physically. Yes, he compared the Nigerian legislator, a lawmaker in Nigeria, with a lawmaker in India. I can't see that one now. It's on page 20. No, that's not on page 20. Okay, let me read the one I have on page, because of time I have to rush. What we have on page 20, I will read it now. It said, for an average worker in Nigeria who earns 18,000, the minimum, he must work for 777 years to get what one senator who is representing him will get in one single year. That's what we are doing with our revenue, with our resources. So it's difficult to pay 18,000 naira, but it's not difficult to maintain somebody who will earn what a worker will get in 777 years in just 1 year. This is another very disturbing example. I experienced this in Ilori. My brother was by then the general manager at Ilori, and was retired. I like it talking with you. I went to visit him in his office. And early in the morning, it was around 9-10 a.m., I discovered something was being carried live. In the morning, it's unusual for NTA to carry an event. It's not a national event, not a democracy day, not Independence Day. But do you know what was happening that day? It was Igbinedo in Okada. Igbinedo in Okada. One of his daughters, our wedding day, he paid for NTA to carry it live. And I asked my brother, how much does he pay? He said he can't pay to have anything live on NTA for 30 minutes must be in minutes. Must be in minutes. And here is the man that started for I think 9-10. He was still receiving people in the hall. And it was being broadcast live. You know, when you have more than necessary in terms of money, you may lose your senses sometimes. Because you will have to ask yourself, what concerns me in Ilori? What concerns a man in Sokoto? What concerns a man in Port Harcourt that I have to watch the wedding ceremony of someone in Edo State? But because there is money, that is, the factor number 4, we are rushing to meet up with the time, is what I call fake economy. Yes, this is what I wanted to say. Nigeria, we must learn to stop operating a fake economy. What we have now is actually a fake economy. And the fake economy has been kicked against over 1,000 years ago. The Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith narrated with an authentic chain of transmission in Sunan Abi Dawud, Al-Mutashabbi' bima lam yu'ta kalabisi thawbayn sur. The Prophet ﷺ said, you must not boast of what you don't have. You must live according to your resources. Don't display to people. Don't grandstand. Don't tell people you have what you don't have. This is exactly what you are having in Nigeria. Like I said, politicians, when they want to deceive us, they will tell us that good news, that Nigeria is number 20, sometimes number 21. We are either between 20 or 21 when they rate the economies of the world. But this is when we talk of what? Nominal GDP. But by the time we look at what means, what to be wealthy as a nation actually means, I told you earlier on, is when you take your GDP alongside your per capita income. This in a simple language, it means if a nation has 100,000 naira and he has just 10 citizens, how much will belong to each and every one of those citizens? Can you tell me? Of 1,000 and they are 10. That is 100 per head. Now, another nation also has, let's say, 300,000, triple the time. But this nation has 97 citizens. Who is richer? Who is richer? The one with 1,000 or 10 citizens, or the one with 3,000 with 90 citizens? Definitely, the one with 100, the one with 1,000, with only 10 citizens is far, far richer. And this is what the economists will say, take your GDP alongside your per capita income. But during my research, I discovered that the truth that is not being told is that Nigeria is rated number 126 in the world if we take GDP alongside our per capita income. But when we want people to deceive us by just taking nominal GDP, they say, oh, you are number 20 or 21 in the world. But the reality is that we are number 126 in the world. And that is what makes me ask this question. Are we behaving accordingly in this country? Are we cutting our coats according to our sizes or even according to our clothes? Unfortunately, the answer to all this is no. It is outrageous to have a secondary school in Nigeria where the school fees will be 1 million naira or above. It's outrageous when we know our worth in terms of economics. It is also unrealistic to have a plot of land that will be sold for 15 million, 19 million. Somebody told me last month in Lagos, he bought a plot of land in Lekki at the rate of 19 million naira. Yes, in Lekki. So, and that's not that alone. What we spend on Hajj and Jerusalem, this is another experience. I must say this is our state, Kwara State. I listened one day to, I think it was on the news, that the state government was sponsoring so number of pilgrims to Jerusalem. Then, on further findings, and they also revealed it was revealed that I think it was 200 or 100 and something. But those who paid to go on pilgrimage, they were not more than 3. Somebody that knows that he has something to do, religious purpose, in a place, who can pay, I think there were 2 or 3, maximum of 5 maybe. But the state government will sponsor more than 100. The same thing happens in Hajj. I think the recession has taught us a lesson that they are not doing that. And since I've mentioned Hajj, so that we will be fair, we are all guilty, Muslims and non-Muslims in the country. My experience when I was in Saudi Arabia, people used to ask us, what's wrong with you as a nation? The highest number of pilgrims you can find out that come to Hajj every year is from Indonesia. Indonesia has the highest quota because it's based on how many millions people in the quota. So Indonesia as a nation has the highest. But what happens in Nigeria, most of you have witnessed this. Indonesia will have a centrally organized pilgrims board, where you will have perhaps, let's take vehicles for example. Because in Saudi Arabia, you are not going to convey your pilgrims. There are vehicles to convey pilgrims. All you need is for your workers to move around. Indonesia, I think they didn't normally have more than 15 vehicles to move around. But when you come to Nigeria, federalism. Each state, I know of a state, a single state in Nigeria, that had more than 15 vehicles. A state, one single state. And that will be replicated across board. A state that is not so financially buoyant may have 8, 10. When you merge all this together, you have in hundreds of vehicles. Just because you want to perform Hajj. That is another example of how we are wasting our resources. The late is now late. May Allah have mercy on him. Late former governor, the first civilian governor of Osun State, Governor Isiaka Adeleke. When he performed Hajj, I happened to be on the same Hajj. He was governor of Osun State by then. We don't spend. Because the chairman by then, I don't know, the state province board over there, knew the governor was coming on Hajj. He wanted to impress the governor. And went on to buy a brand new Mercedes vehicle. It was the trend by then, vehicle in Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, the law of Saudi Arabia does not allow any vehicle that does not convey 6, 8 or more passengers on Hajj. You know what happened? They had to sell the car after buying it at a very high price. They said it at a just take away price. Because by the time the governor arrived, the car was not useful for him. Because why didn't you find out before embarking on salt? So it's because in Nigeria there is money, spend it. So that is what I said about a fake economy that we are running in this country. We must talk about corruption. Corruption is also a major factor that led us into recession. And may God forbid, unless it is tackled, it may also be another factor very soon that will lead us to another recession. May God forbid. I just want to quote Baba Bibi, one of the statements I benefited from him. I had Baba once, I think it was a lecture organized by Kwara TV by then at State Library. Baba said in that lecture that if we don't kill corruption in Nigeria, corruption will certainly kill Nigeria. It's not a cause, it's a fact. If we continue to behave the way we are behaving, and you see, when we say the rich ones are corrupt, the poor ones are the cause, because we are encouraging them. If we heed the advice given by the Prophet ﷺ in an authentic hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man ra'a minkum munkaran فليغيره بيده فإن لم يستطع فبلسانه فإن لم يستطع فبقلبه وذلك أضعف الإيمان." If we see anything wrong, instead of trying to benefit from it, we must blow the whistle. Whistle blowing is part of Islam. This is the Prophet ﷺ telling you, if you don't have authority to curb excesses of someone, say it out, let people know, advise him first. If he refuses to eat, you can let who should know that this particular person is actually living over and above his resources. So that is what we just said about corruption. Well, our time, we don't have enough time now. But finally, let me take this factor. It's one of the major factors too that led us into recession. The Naira-dollar exchange rate. You know, as I told you, it moved from about 150 to 160 to almost 500. It's back to about 380, 370 now. But What actually confuses me as a person is that why must Nigeria? Dollar is not our currency. But Nigeria is feeling the impact, even more than the Americans who own the dollars. But why? We all know the answers. We all know the answer to this. It is because we import almost everything we consume in this country. That is why we are facing this problem. If dollar goes up, comes down, if we have something we can buy, produce locally, unless if somebody wants to travel out, you will know the price of the dollar. But if you go and buy gari in market today, the dollar rate will impact on the price of, because we, I once had it, I think former President Basco said that when he was in power, he asked for the items that were being imported to Nigeria. And to his biggest surprise, he found what? Toothpaste. That even Nigeria were using dollars to import toothpaste. It's unfortunate. And this is why we must call for the support, the necessary support, for what the present administration is calling us for. This is what they are saying. We must produce what we consume. But that is not enough. And we must also learn to consume what we produce. Because it's one thing to produce, it's another thing for Nigerians to buy. They will not. When will they stop saying Igbo made? So we must learn to purchase. We must learn to consume what we produce, just as the government is encouraging us to produce what we consume. But I have an idea here. I actually benefited it from a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. You see, when Islam came as a religion, there were certain things that were not compatible with Islam. But people were very much used to them. Allah knew it would be very difficult for them to just migrate from those things all of a sudden. Then Allah introduced what we call gradual approach. This is what happened. Not now, I'm saying it, not now, in those days. In those days when alcohol was prohibited. In the beginning, because people were so used to alcohol, then Allah said, okay, if you drink alcohol, don't come to mosque. So it's not a matter of don't drink now. But if you drink it, do not come near our mosque. Now, after a while, a sensible man will say, what will send me away of a mosque? Is that a good thing? Then he would have a rethink of what he or she, or for that, or whichever may be the case. That is what I am advising the government of this federation to look into. Our appetite for foreign-made materials in Nigeria is very, very high. Unless we are deceiving ourselves, to just tell people, start buying made in Nigeria, it may be difficult to happen at a go. But what we can do is what I prefer to call, instead of made in Nigeria, that is the ultimate goal. Let us begin with made in Nigeria. Some countries in the world have tried this. Our goal is to reach a level where we will have everything, or almost everything, made in Nigeria. But in the present situation, let us begin with the approach of made in Nigeria. That is by inviting those who produce what our people go out to buy. Let them come to this country and make the same product in Nigeria. People will get employed at least. And if government is to take this direction of make in Nigeria, that will eventually lead to make in Nigeria. We must insist on something. And that is what we call knowledge and technology transfer. If China should come now to manufacture motorcycles here, or keke napep, it must be part of our agreement. That when are you transferring the knowledge of making this keke napep to Nigerian engineers. Countries in the world are doing that. It's a bargaining power that you have. This is what I said I benefited from the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, during the battle of Badr, they captured some people as prisoners of war. The uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Al-Abbas ibn Abdul Muttalib, was a pagan by then. He happened to be one of the prisoners of war after the battle of Badr. Now, the rule was that if you have money, you can pay ransom and we set you free. But as they were paying, the Prophet ﷺ introduced another dimension. He said, look, instead of paying money that we will consume, any one of you, because the society of Medina by then was dominated by illiterates, who could neither read nor write, and it was a source of power. So the Prophet mandated that any prisoner of war that is literate, you don't need to pay. A prisoner of war that is literate, keep your money. Let your family keep their money. But you will ransom yourself by teaching 2 or 3 according to the program we are going to design. We will give you of our children, of our youth who are illiterate. Any day you successively train them and they become literate, you are going to be set free. And that is how the level of literacy in Medina was raised to a very high level. So this is what we call technology and knowledge transfer. If they must come to make in Nigeria, it's not just make in Nigeria and go away. It must be part of our agreement that there must be a mechanism for technology and knowledge transfer to our local engineers. It's part of the solutions for economic recession. Well, on this note, we have to, do we call it a day? But before I go, I think let me talk on this Islamic banking issue. Because I'm not an economist, but because my area of law has to do with banking and insurance, there's no way I won't deal with the economist. When we talk about debt, it's part of what led us into recession in Nigeria. Nigeria used to have a debt profile of during Obasanjo. Let's go back to Obasanjo. Obasanjo tried, well, he had his own deficiencies, but the man meant well for this country and he tried. We had a debt profile of about $45 billion. And Obasanjo started appealing to our creditors, particularly the Paris Club, to write off most of our debt. And they did. By the time he was leaving office, do you know how much Nigeria owed external debt? It was just $3.348 billion. It's very good to manage, because the economists will tell us how you know the manageable rate of your debt profile is when you link your GDP to the percentage of your debt in your GDP. So 3 point something to our GDP was actually very, very manageable to Nigeria. But if I tell you how much we are owing today, you will shout, oh, because between when the Obasanjo leave office, 2007, and this is 2000, just 10 years. I think we are in the same region again. I think we more than 40 again. But that is not the issue, because to economists generally, debt itself is not a problem. It's normal in an economy to incur debt for development. And that is why it is usually said that when you find yourself in an economic difficulty, you have 3 ways out. Any economic difficulty, recession, downturn, whatever, you have 3 ways out. One of the 3 options is either you spend less, or you earn more, or you borrow. You spend less, you earn more. We have treated all this in the past. Or you borrow. So if we borrow for a good purpose, it's not a problem. But what do we borrow for in Nigeria? I don't need to go too far. If our leaders can be so cruel, so inhumane, to tell us that we wanted to borrow 2.1 billion to save your lives, to fight Boko Haram, whereas they knew they wanted to use it for election. This is a problem in Nigeria. This is the Dasuki gate. Because they were not confused. The confusion is with us. They knew the purpose for taking the loan. And this is what, since we are discussing Sharia perspective here, Sharia has a solution to this. Where we have an environment that is, the corruption is endemic, like we have in Nigeria now. Instead of you taking a loan, raw cash, raw loan, Islamic banking or Islamic law generally introduces what we call sukuk. And that is why all over the world, in Europe, in America, in Asia, Japan, they are all using sukuks today. Sukuk is the most suitable for us, especially in an economy that is ridden with corruption like this. Because sukuk is also a way of taking loans from people. But instead of just saying this is what we need on paper, this is our need, we are going to do. Sukuk is an arrangement that Nigeria will tell them, this is the project we are going to invest your money in. Don't give us money. We are going to make you owners of a share of our property. But because most of the properties that are being used all over the world for sukuk, they are what we call sovereign properties. It's not easy for a country, like when you go to Malaysia, I've seen some Malaysia faces here. When you go to Malaysia, your very beautiful airport that was built there, it was built by a sukuk arrangement. But it's not easy for Malaysia to lose its airport. And that is why sukuk does not transfer the property completely to an investor. It's a temporary transfer. You will make a foreign investor. There are money all over the world. People are looking for where to invest their money. But they don't want to come to an environment where corruption is so endemic like this. So sukuk is being used to tackle corruption in law. You will tell them you want to build so power plant, whatever. This is the project. We are not taking any amount in cash. You are going to invest as a co-owner with us. And the arrangement will be, when we start using this facility that we are building, you as a part owner, you will be getting income from what is being generated from the facility. And the arrangement will be, for how long are you willing to be a partner with us as a country? 20 years, 30 years, 40, 50. After those years, 50 or less or more, we will buy back our interest in the same property. There is no way anybody can invest your money in that way. Because nobody will just give you 2.1 for Boko Haram that will be used for an election. He must see and he must be a co-owner with you. On this note, when we are talking of sukuk, sukuk works with government. What of individuals? Islamic banking is actually better, not only for Muslims, because Islamic banking actually takes care of what we call the real sector of the economy, where goods and services are produced. Another example, I have a lot of examples here. It happened here in Illinois. A primary school teacher once approached me. He wanted to get married and he needed loan from me. Even though I told him, do you know I'm a salary earner too? Because the problem with those of us who studied in Saudi Arabia is that they thought we are also selling oil. So I told him, how much did you need? He told me it was an amount of money that I could give him as part of my salary. No problem in that. But I asked him, this is what Al-Quran told me, وَإِذَا تَدَايَنْتُمْ بِدَيْنٍ إِلَىٰ أَجَلٍ مُسَمًّى فَاكْتُبُوهُ. There's no problem in asking your debtor, when are you going to pay? How are you going to pay? Our people, if you start asking that way, they will say, it's part of economy. If you want to run our economy the way it is being run elsewhere. I asked him, okay, what is your arrangement for repayment? Do you know what the gentleman told me? It means it was common. I've just come to Nigeria by then. I didn't know the climate much. He said, don't worry, doctor, I've applied for a Greek loan. Teachers, he has applied for a Greek loan. Whereas in his own intention, what did he want to use the money for? Yahoo loan. He told me, frankly, I will use it for my marriage ceremony. But don't worry, I will pay you back because I've already applied for an agreed loan. When the government pays me, when the bank pays me an agreed loan through the state government, I will pay you your money. This is what conventional banking is promoting. That take money, you said it is for agreed, whether you farm or not. I have no business in that. My own business is next year when you come back, you pay the capital and so percentage as interest. But in Islamic banking, it doesn't happen that way. An Islamic bank cannot just advance money. Is it a mudaraba, or musharaka, or muzara, or any other product that will actually become a co-owner in the farm? Islamic banking can say, okay, the farm will cost you 100,000. I will give you 50,000. You go and look for 50,000. That's what we call musharaka. Sometimes he may say, even one single naira I don't have. There is a way out. I will take you as a mudarib. Mudarib means I will be the provider of the capital. You will be the provider of labor. Anything we get from this will be distributed in an agreed upon ratio between us. What I'm saying, Eshed, is that this is part of the ways we can tackle recession in this country by learning some things from Islamic economy, from Islamic banking in particular. May Allah make it easy for us. And finally. And our people, please, Islamic banks are not zakah and sadaqah foundations. Please, I hold them this duty to explain. Because a lot of people are complaining to us that even this so-called Jais Bank, Islamic window, Islamic banking, when you go there, they will say you will also pay something. People want to see an Islamic bank that just give them money and don't expect any return. It's not possible. The only difference between an Islamic bank and a conventional is that Islamic bank is looking for profit, while conventional is looking for interest. And there is a huge gap of difference between profit and interest. This is not the place to address that now. But if you want to know, you can talk to experts. They will explain to you. But please, as I said, Islamic banks are not zakah and sadaqah foundations. Allahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad.
Takbir.